The content of Hunter Biden's laptop has been the source of hundreds of articles and allegations against the 53-year-old one-time financier. His alleged past business dealings in Ukraine and China continue to shadow Joe Biden. Now, a former CIA official has reportedly said that Biden's campaign and Blinken orchestrated the Hunter Biden cover-up story. The U.S. State Department is so far silent on the issue. Weeks before the 2020 election campaign that pitted Joe Biden against Donald Trump, the New York Post claimed it had received emails and other documents from Hunter Biden's laptop. The emails and documents reportedly implicated Hunter Biden and his father in questionable business dealings with Ukraine while Biden was vice president in 2015. At a 2020 debate, Biden cited a letter from 51 former intelligence officials to claim the laptop story was a Russian disinformation campaign. Former CIA Deputy Michael Morell reportedly told the House Judiciary and Intelligence Committees that Blinken was the impetus for the letter. Remember, Anthony Blinken served as a senior advisor in the Biden campaign. Reports say Michael Morell was one of the signatories to the letter and helped organize that letter. The former intelligence officials in the letter reportedly suggested Russian involvement. However, they acknowledged that they did not have any evidence of it. Republicans have argued that the letter helped discredit the laptop story altogether just before the election. The House Judiciary and Intelligence Committee has asked Blinken to hand over all documents and communications relating to this specific letter. Now, the U.S. Secretary of State has been asked to provide the House with identities of everyone involved in its inception, drafting, editing, signing, publishing, or promotion. On Friday, the State Department refused to answer questions about the former CIA official's claim. Spokesperson Vedant Patel said the matter is not a State Department issue and ducked the question. Meanwhile, a poll by the Associated Press, NORC Center for Public Affairs Research shows that 47% of Democrats want to see Biden seek a second term. Reports suggest President Biden is expected to launch his re-election campaign in video next week. Our correspondent Susan Tehrani has been tracking the Hunter Biden story very closely. Listen into her report from New York.
The State Department on Friday refused to answer any questions regarding claims made by a former CIA official that Anthony Blinken, now Biden's Secretary of State, led efforts in 2020 to have 51 intelligence officials write a letter claiming that the Hunter Biden laptop story was basically Russian disinformation. The House Judiciary and Intelligence Committee said Thursday that former CIA Deputy Michael Morell told the committee under oath that Blinken was the impetus for the letter. On Friday, a State Department spokesman, however, said that the department will not be commenting on Anthony Blinken's involvement regarding that letter. Nonetheless, the House Judiciary and Intelligence Committee has asked Blinken to hand over all documents and communications relating to that letter and provide the House with, quote, identities of everyone involved in its inception, drafting, editing, signing, publishing, or promotion. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
Joining us now, we have Spencer Creshley, a world-renowned author, political analyst, and a former communications advisor for President Obama's campaigns. Welcome to the broadcast, sir.
Glad to be here.
So, ghosts from the past continue to haunt Joe Biden and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. What kind of impact will this have on the upcoming U.S. presidential election?
I think very little, and I want to emphasize that, as is unfortunately usually the case with the Trumpist Republican Party, Mr. Morell's testimony actually says exactly the opposite of what Jim Jordan claims it says, and as is all too common, they've selectively chosen an edited passage from his testimony. The Washington Post has an excellent article about this. I think it's in today's edition, exposing just how flimsy Jim Jordan's charges are. They explicitly asked Mr. Morell, did Anthony Blinken ask you to push this story? And he explicitly said, absolutely not. He said nothing of the kind. Right. I encourage people to look this up in the Washington Post or other coverage that's showing up in the American media today. Unfortunately, that is completely irrelevant to what Jim Jordan and the Trump Republicans are trying to do here. And if I could, this is a classic technique of disinformation. based on a psychological phenomenon, and sorry for the technical language, known as the availability heuristic, which means basically we remember things that are easy to remember. So if somebody mentions that they saw, a volcano the other day on TV, then you'll be easily able to remember details of volcanoes. And so by repeating Hunter Biden and Hunter Biden laptop over and over and over again, they make it appear to the public as if there must be some story about the Hunter Biden laptop, when in fact there is not. The Hunter Biden's laptop and everything around it is being looked into by the Department of Justice, as one would hope and expect. If there's anything there, I'm sure it will come out, and I'm sure that everybody who has any interest in the rule of law will welcome that.
Right.
But that's not the point of this. It's entirely a disinformation campaign.
Spencer, I also need to, again, sort of reiterate this. You have covered it partly in your previous answer. The White House has asked to refer to the full transcript of former CIA Deputy Director Michael Morell's testimony, and that isolated statements should not be considered. Is there any chance that Blinken and Biden get away scratch-free from this? Will it not leave some kind of a hint for the coming election?
Oh, of course it will, and that's the entire point. That's been the point for a long time with the Republicans, unfortunately. It predates President Trump, but he really perfected it, an all-out assault on any faith in any kind of factual or logical truth. And this is typical of authoritarian leaders, unfortunately. The point is not just to lie shamelessly, which President Trump is amazing at, more than 30,000 documented lies and distortions during his administration, just an astounding number by any standard in a functioning democracy. The point is not just to lie shamelessly. The point is to stage an assault on the idea that you could ever possibly know what's true and turn politics into tribal warfare, essentially, so that if you align with the Trumpist tribe, you don't really care whether what he says is true or not. You're just on his team, essentially. And if you are in the anti-Trump team, the Trumpist folks want you to believe that people who object to these lies just don't like President Trump or former President Trump for some reason. So this is not really a contest between traditional left and right in a democracy. This is a contest between authoritarianism and an authoritarian assault on truth and democracy, whether you're a conservative or a liberal in that democracy.
Spencer, now the response from the State Department, or rather the lack of a response from the State Department, has also raised eyebrows. When questioned about Blinken's involvement in the Hunter Biden laptop cover-up story, the U.S. State Department, they didn't answer it. They ducked out, whichever way you want to see it. Do you feel the lack of a proper response from the White House or State Department is giving further rise to suspicion?
This is another aspect of this, unfortunately. They exploit the legitimate features of the rule of law to make it somehow seem suspect. So this is not a State Department issue. This is a Biden campaign issue. Anthony Blinken was working with the Biden campaign when this encounter happened. Again, I encourage people to read the Washington Post or the other coverage and see how little there is to this story. He was not in the State Department. And so the role of the State Department spokesperson is certainly not to comment on political stories that might have happened during the previous presidential campaign. Unfortunately, that kind of detail requires the amount of explanation I just gave it. And again, the Trumpist Republicans are relying on that because they know people's eyes glaze over when it takes a little while to explain something. Furthermore, there's another old saying in the disinformation business: if you're explaining, you're losing. It doesn't matter if what you're saying is factually true. The emotional impact of explaining something makes it appear to the audience as if you must have something bad to explain. I think the best we can hope for is to continue to try to inform the public about the ways their minds are being manipulated by people who are operating in absolutely bad faith. This is not the usual political back and forth where, of course, people have their biases and, of course, they make their side look best in the argument. That's all legitimate democratic debate. That's not what this is. This is pure disinformation.
Thank you for joining in, Spencer. That was Spencer Kreishley, world-renowned author and political analyst, joining us from California.
My pleasure.